Welcome to the second episode in a Legendarium series about Rome's conquest of the Iberian Peninsula. In Part 2, Crushing Carthage, we will talk about how Rome allied with the Iberian tribes to drive the Carthaginians into the sea. The Iberian tribes hoped that by doing so, they would win freedom from foreign rule. But Rome decided to stay, and the Iberians found themselves with new overlords. In the year 218 BC, the Iberian Peninsula became a battleground between the two superpowers of the ancient world, Rome and Carthage. Rome's first victories were won by the Scipio brothers, Gnaeus and Publius. The Scipio brothers then won the loyalty of the Celto-Iberians, who dominated the northwest with heavy bribes. Meanwhile, Hasdrubal the Carthaginian, who still ruled in the south, brought in reinforcements from Africa. Specifically, he brought the Numidian horsemen, regarded as the best light cavalry in the ancient world. When the Numidian cavalry faced off against the Roman legions, they made hit-and-run raids against the Roman flanks. When the Romans sent out small parties of soldiers to pursue the horsemen, the Numidians drew them out deep into the countryside, surrounded them, and then slaughtered them with javelins. The Numidian horsemen proved decisive at the Battle of Upper BAETIS in the year 211 BC. They sowed chaos among the Roman army and killed Publius and Gnaeus Scipio. After the deaths of the Roman commanders, the Celto-Iberians simply deserted their allies and left them to their fate, which was being slaughtered by the Carthaginians. A few Roman survivors made their way to the mouth of the Ebro River and held on to a small beachhead. Back home in Rome, the Senate put together an expedition to relieve their comrades in Iberia. Yet they could find no one willing to take command of the army because almost all members of the Roman elite regarded Iberia as a lost cause. Yet another Scipio man, who would become known as Scipio Africanus, took the Senate up on its offer because he wished to avenge his kinsman and win a great name for himself. With no other takers, the Senate gave Scipio Africanus command of the army, despite his being only 24 years old at the time. Scipio Africanus led 25,000 Romans to Iberia. Once he saw this new Roman army, Hasdrubal focused on keeping control of his own holdings in the south and east. The two sides fought border skirmishes for about 3 years that really didn't change the balance of power in the peninsula. Yet Scipio Africanus raised new reinforcements by promising the Iberian tribes that he would free them from outside rule, that once they allied and drove the Carthaginians into the sea, the Romans would leave the Iberians in peace. Many of the Iberian kings and chiefs took Scipio at his word, and they signed up in great numbers. By the time that Scipio faced Hasdrubal the Carthaginian at Bacula in the year 208 BC, he had 35,000 men to Hasdrubal's 25,000. Hasdrubal was utterly defeated. Scipio took 10,000 prisoners and killed 6,000 of Hasdrubal's men. Yet Hasdrubal managed to escape and frantically raised an army of 74,000 soldiers. Scipio himself raised his army to a total strength of 48,000 and fought his enemy in a final confrontation at the Battle of Ilipa in 206 BC. Scipio Africanus formed up on the plain just outside Hasdrubal's camp. Scipio reversed the usual Roman strategy of putting heavy Roman troops in the center and allies on the flanks. Instead, he put Roman manipular legions on the flanks and the lighter Iberian infantry in the center. Hasdrubal took the bait and charged forward. Scipio then did basically the same maneuver that Hannibal did at the Battle of Cannae almost a decade earlier. He pulled the center back, moved the flanks forward, and surrounded the Carthaginians in a double envelopment that ended in their almost total annihilation. With Carthaginian power in Iberia almost utterly crushed, Scipio Africanus became a national hero back home in Rome. The Iberian kings and chiefs hurried to pledge their allegiance to Rome, and Scipio would crown himself with supreme glory by defeating Hannibal himself in Africa only 4 years later. In a tragic irony, Rome would ultimately turn against Scipio Africanus when a man named Cato the Elder accused Scipio of using his victories to further and enrich himself rather than Rome. The Roman elites and the Senate believed Cato the Elder, and Scipio would ultimately be frozen out of Roman government. Yet Scipio also forgot his promises to the Iberians about their liberation. Indeed, when he returned home, Cato advised the Senate to keep control of the Iberian Mediterranean coast. He feared that Carthage might return if Rome left, but the Roman elite also became interested in the grain-growing regions found in the Ebro and Beta river valleys. In the year 197 BC, long after the end of the war with Carthage, the Romans split their holdings in Iberia. The Mediterranean coast became Hispania Caesterior, and what is today Andalusia became Hispania Ulterior. Local governors and garrison commanders won compliance from the local chiefs and kings by offering alliances in their wars with other Iberian potentates. They bribed others, and when all else failed, they simply crushed them in battle. Around the year 195 BC, the Roman provinces in Iberia had a new governor named Cato the Elder, the same man who had ruined Scipio Africanus' career. That same year, the Turtidam nation of Iberia launched a massive uprising against Roman rule. They killed the tax collectors, laid siege to the garrisons, and no Roman could travel the roads of Iberia in safety. Cato the Elder dispensed with the bribes and cajoling that marked earlier Roman policy. From now on, Iberians would either be a friend or an enemy to Rome, and Cato found many enemies. He confronted a rebel army that outnumbered him almost 3-1 at the Battle of Emporia. When his men appeared to be losing heart, Cato burned their ships and told his men that there would be no safety in defeat. It would either be victory or death. The gambit must have worked because the Romans crushed the Iberian rebels. Cato the Elder then sent orders to all the towns in Iberia, telling them to tear down their walls. Those who agreed to tear down their walls would be left in peace. Those that refused were besieged and burned to ashes. The people of those towns would be driven into the countryside, where they would surely starve with their crops reduced to ashes. And so Rome was able to consolidate its rule along the Mediterranean coast of Iberia. That wraps things up for this installment of the Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.